indications of the fall of the government of Syria. While I'm not an expert in the field of eschatology, I am a historian, and I would like to give a historical presentation to our guests. Now, the war in Syria is not the first nor the last war that international Zionism has done against the Muslim world. The war in Syria came as a result of this picture that you see here. And this picture is from the year 2020, when in that time, US President Donald Trump is going to blackmail and force a number of Arab states to sign normalization agreements with Israel. Here in this picture, you see representatives from United Arab Emirates and Bahrain who signed the so-called Abraham Accords. What were the Abraham Accords about? They were the final defeat and surrender of the Arabs to Israel and its apartheid against the Palestinians. But the war against Palestine and Syria did not start in 2024, but it started in 1897, when, as we all know, this is the year when the first Zionist Congress will be organized in Basel, Switzerland, where the Zionist movement, led by Theodor Herzl, will establish the Zionist movement with the aim of invading Palestine, or at least creating a Jewish state. The attempts of the Zionists for creating a Jewish state will not succeed for as long as Sultan Abdul Hamid will be the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. But in 1809, an extremist Turkish nationalist movement known as the Young Turks will organize a coup in Istanbul, like the one which happened in Damascus few days ago, where Sultan Abdul Hamid, he will be toppled, and we will have a fascist regime which is going to take power in Istanbul. The Young Turks, they will remove Islam from the identity of the Ottoman state. They will embrace Turkish nationalism, and for this, they will be supported by the World Zionist Congress, who are going to send to Istanbul a person by the name Vladimir Jabotinsky. For those of you who know the history of Zionism and revisionist Zionism, Jabotinsky is the founder of this movement and, in a way, the spiritual father of the Likud party of Benjamin Netanyahu, which rules today Israel. Jabotinsky will be the father of Benzion Meliovsky, known otherwise as Benzion Netanyahu, who was the father of the present Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So after organizing a coup in Istanbul, the Young Turks, they will push the Zionists, they will push the Young Turks to join World War I, where the Ottoman Empire is going to declare war on Russia. Because of the war, the Ottomans, while at first they will succeed on defeating the British and the French in the Battle of Gallipoli, later on they will be defeated. In 1917, when the British Empire was being defeated by the Germans, the Zionist World Congress will approach the British government, and the British government will trade with the Zionists in exchange for their financial support and bringing the United States to join the war on behalf of Britain. The British will issue the Balfour Declaration, where they will promise Palestine to the Jews. Now, with the end of World War I, the Peace Conference of Paris, which before it, the British, they had cheated the Arabs, of Sheriff Hosein of Mecca, where the Arabs will join the British against the Ottomans, but when the war will finish, they will not keep their promises to the Arabs, and Palestine will be turned into a British mandate. Under this British mandate, the British will start to bring hundreds of thousands of Jews from Eastern Europe. Most of them will come from Russia, Poland, and what we know nowadays as Ukraine, and they will start to establish their first settlement in the occupied Palestine. The native Arab population of Palestine, which is going to understand that the danger that is coming to them, will riot against the Jews in 1920, 1921, and the most famous rioting is the one of 1929, known as the Burak Revolt, when Palestinians will refuse the taking of the wall of Burak, otherwise known as the Western Wall, by the Jews, because they understood that these Jewish colonists who came to Palestine by the British, they were not simply coming to settle there, but they wanted to take even the most holiest site of Palestine, which is Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, during World War II, many Palestinians hoped that Germany and Italy will win the war. Unfortunately for them, the Germans were defeated, and the new world order, which will be established after the Second World War, will give the mandate of Palestine to Jewish colonists who were a minority in the country. In 1947, the Americans, they will play with the newly formed United Nations, which will come up with a UN partition plan, and on May 14, 1948, the State of Israel will be established. The establishment of the Israeli state will bring to Arabs horrible massacres. We'll have the massacre of Deir Yassin and what the Arabs call Al-Nakba, where white European, non-Semitic Jewish immigrants will force more than 750,000 Palestinians to leave their country. The neighboring Arab countries, which were just formed after Second World War, after they were colonized by the British and the French after World War I, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, they will come to the help of the Palestinians. They will go to fight against Israel, but unfortunately, due to American and Soviet pressures, Czech arming of Israeli settlers, the war will end in a stalemate. Now, the first Arab-Israeli war, which will end in stalemate, will not be the only war that Israel is going to fight with Arabs. The second war will be the so-called war of the Suez Crisis, where Israel, along with France and United Kingdom, they will invade the Sinai Peninsula in response of Egypt's nationalization of the Suez Channel. Then, after this war, we'll have the Six-Day War, a war in which Israel is going to defeat its neighboring Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and will occupy from them territories which before belonged to these countries. Israelis will invade the West Bank and Masjid al-Aqsa from Jordan, Gaza Strip from Egypt, and the Golan Heights from Syria. Now, the fourth major Arab-Israeli war will be the Ramadan War, or as it is known by the Zionists, the Yom Kippur War of 1973. In this war, where Syria and Egypt will attack Israel, the Egyptians will manage to recover territories that they had lost to Israel before. The Americans, who will understand the power of the Egyptian army, where Israel understood that it could not, in a conventional war, prevail over Egypt unless they use the nuclear bomb, will start negotiations with President Anwar Sadat. And finally, in 1978, Egypt is going to sign the Camp David Accords, where, according to these accords, which will be followed in 1979 by the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty, Egypt will officially abandon the issue of Palestine in exchange for taking Sinai and receiving money from the Americans. Egypt will be the first Arab country which is going to abandon the issue of Palestine. In the meantime, and since 1967, the Palestinians who were made war refugees during the war of 1948 and who after 1967, around 350,000 of them will also be deported from the West Bank, they will move to Jordan, where under the leadership of the Fatah and PLO, they will continue their resistance against Israel. But in 1970, during the so-called Black September, Jordan will remove the Palestinian resistant fighters from Jordan. Jordan will declare war on Palestinians. And from there, the Palestinian resistance will move to South Lebanon, where even in South Lebanon, Israel, who will face the same problem that it faced in the recent war with Hezbollah, will militarily invade Lebanon and Beirut, and in 1982 will force the Palestinian resistance to abandon and leave Lebanon, and from this time onwards, the Palestinian leadership will be exiled in Tunisia. Now, the Palestinians who were hopeless inside of Israel and the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip, in 1897 to 1993 will start the first Intifada. Intifada was a fight by civilian Palestinians who left without any hope, abandoned by all neighboring Arab countries, except Syria and Iran, will start to fight with stones and suicide bombings against the Zionists. The Zionist regime of Israel, who will fear the uprising of the Palestinians in 1993, will work out with Yasser Arafat, who will be recognized later on even as the president of the Palestinians, the chairman of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority. They will negotiate with him a peace agreement where Israelis will allow Arafat to come back to West Bank and Gaza Strip on a condition that he will pacify the Palestinians. The aim of the Oslo Accords was to create a kind of Palestinian state. But the Oslo Accords will be finished will be killed in 1995 when a Jewish extremist will assassinate the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. After the killing of Rabin, there will be no more peace between Palestinians and Israelis. Now, during the time that the Zionists will try to have peace with the Palestinians, a peace process which is going to fail, the Americans under President Bush I will start a process which is known as the establishment of a new world order. What will happen is that after using Saddam Hussein against Iraq, the Americans will push Saddam Hussein to invade Kuwait, and they will use the justification for the invasion of Kuwait as a justification to launch a war against Iraq. This war, which is known as the First Gulf War, will be the first war in a series of wars which the Americans and the Zionists will start against the Arab countries. Here I'm going to play a video with you where you will see that on September 11, 1991, so this is September 11, 1991, not September 11, 2001. So the first September 11 belongs to Bush Sr. We will have here President Bush, who after defeating Saddam Hussein, he will go to the US Congress and he will announce the start of a new world order. So we have here Bush, who goes to the US Congress. So these are his remarks on September 11, 1991. President Bush announces the start of a new world order. Imran Hosein mentions. And for as long Russia was there, the Americans and the Zionists, they couldn't go and topple and commit genocide against Muslims. Because whenever the Americans will go to bomb Egypt or Iraq or Libya, next day the Soviets will join the fight and they will even threaten the Americans with a nuclear war. But now Bush says we no longer have a Cold War, but he says a new world is coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. So what will happen is that with the first Iraq war and the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Americans, they will kill the bipolar world system, where you had the communists on one side and then you had the capitalists. So there will be no more Soviet Union to sponsor Arafat, Mandela, Gaddafi, or all the freedom fighters of our planet. So Bush will celebrate the creation of a new world order, and he will say we no longer live in an era where we couldn't play with the United Nations, and we will always end up in a stalemate. The stalemate was always offered by the Soviets, because if the Americans wanted to bomb and destroy a country on behalf of Israel, the Soviets and the Chinese will always be there who were going to stop that. Now, with the 1990s, when the Oslo Accords will be signed, we will have a new reality in the Muslim world. Number one, Iraq, which was the most powerful Arab Sunni country, will be defeated. And number two is that 10 years later, after September 11 bombings, the Americans are going to wage the second Iraq war, where they are going to destroy and dismantle the Iraqi state. The Palestinians who are left without any hope will organize the second Intifada in 2000 and 2005. And in this time, Israel, which will be emboldened and will think that we have defeated the Arabs, they will, in 2006, find out that there is a new threat that is coming to the Israeli hegemony, and that is the threat of axis of resistance. In 2006, during the Lebanon war, Israelis will be, for the first time in the history, be forced to withdraw and not be able to defeat an Arab country. Now, after the war in Lebanon, we will have the coming of the Arab Spring, an era when Sheikh Imran Hosein became very famous because he foresaw what was happening. The Arab Spring, which was a wave of revolutions sweeping the Arab world, but in particular attacking Egypt, Syria, Libya, and Yemen, will be used by the Zionists and the Americans by sowing sectarian divisions in the Muslim world to destroy the remaining Arab nation states. Egypt will enter into a civil war from 2011 to 2014. Syria will enter in a civil war from 2011 until 8 December 2024, when after almost 14 years of war, finally the government of Bashar al-Assad will be toppled. Libya will be destroyed when NATO will bomb Libya and will kill Gaddafi in collaboration with Takfiri Muslims. We will have Yemen divided, and so forth. Now, after destroying the neighboring Arab states, in 2020, under President Bush, who will be celebrated by the Zionists, here is a coin that they issued for him by calling him the second Cyrus. They will use the American administration to force the remaining Arab countries to sign normalization or peace agreements with Israel. And what this meant a total abandonment to the Palestinian cause. Why will the Zionists call Trump Cyrus? Because for those of you who read the book of Esther, You probably know the story, the biblical story of Mordecai and Esther, who was a prostitute that was used by the leader of the Jewish community in ancient Iran to penetrate the Iranian empire and convince the Iranian king to get rid of his ministers who wanted to expel the Jews from Iran. So, according to Jewish theology, they perceive Trump as the second Cyrus. Now, what will happen is that, abandoned and by the Sunni Muslim world since 2006, Iran, Syria, the Houthi movement of Yemen, the Lebanese Hezbollah, the Palestinian factions like Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they will form a coalition that will be known as the Axis of Resistance. While Iran and Syria and other Islamic and Arab militias, they understood the great Zionist project, which in a way destroyed the Arab countries, and those that were left blackmailed them into submission. They formed this grouping of state and non-state actors to fight and resist the invasion of Palestine by the Zionists. But now, what happened with Palestine? Now, for all of you who have seen the news, on December 8th, we had the toppling of the government of President Bashar al-Assad. A terrorist organization, Tahrir al-Sham, and its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who was wanted by the Americans. His organization will be trained, funded, and directed by the Americans. And when on 27 November 2024, when after more than 12 months of fighting, Hezbollah will sign a ceasefire with Israel, suddenly from Idlib, which is a province neighboring Turkey in Syria, we'll have these jihadi terrorists who are going to launch a wave of attacks, and within a few days they are going to topple the Syrian government. As soon as these jihadis come to power, they will surrender all state assets of Syria to the Zionists. They will give whatever weapons Syria had to the Americans. They will declare that we want peace with Israel, and they will declare that the enemy of New Syria is not Israel, but it is Iran. In response to these offerings, the Americans, they will welcome Jawlani, and they will not mind that he was a wanted terrorist. The toppling of the Syrian government will be celebrated by Israel when, on the same day that the jihadists are going to take Damascus, we'll have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu who is going to celebrate this. We don't have voice or audio, but I think you can read what he's saying. So Netanyahu is going to celebrate the collapse of the Syrian government, and he will say this is a victory against Hezbollah, Iran, and Assad. And at the very same day that the government of Syria collapses, Israel will start occupying Syrian territories, capturing the sources of water for Damascus, which is the Yarmouk River and Al-Wahda Dam. And during the moment that Hezbollah Iran, Hamas were fighting against Israel in support of the Palestinians,
أنتم متشيعون رسميا
finally,
وفق الحديث النبوي الشريف وعلى أسس النظام الإيراني.
now we will have the Israeli army. Here is Colonel Avichai Adrai, who he is going to push the Sunnis across the world at the very moment that Israel was committing a genocide, was massacring the Sunnis of Palestine. The Israeli army is going to appeal to the Sunni Muslims to join its fight against the Shias, because as Colonel Avichai says, all Sunnis must know that Shiism is more dangerous than Judaism. Sunnis must focus on fighting the Shia, especially Iran, because this is what is required by the Salafi Aqidah.
ألم تقرأوا نصوص أهل ذكر من العلماء والفقهاء آباء الشريعة المحمدية الذين حذروكم بشكل واضح وصريح من خطورة الشيعة؟
So he will appeal to Sunni Muslims, instead of fighting and defending Palestine, to go and kill their Shia neighbors. The result of the toppling of the government of Assad in Syria is that in this very moment that we're speaking, Syria doesn't exist anymore. As of today, Syria is divided in 4 occupation zones. One, this was actually 2 weeks ago, some zones where Assad loyalists are still around. Another area occupied by the Kurds and the Americans. Another area under the control of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Another area under Turkish occupation, and another area under Israeli occupation. Now, the person who led the war against the Syrian government was this person, Abu Muhammad al-Golani, a person whom the US government indirectly sponsored him and his organization with 18 billion US dollars. So while on one hand, the Americans had put a reward of $10 million for Golani, on the other hand, as the former US ambassador to Iraq, Turkey, and Albania, James Jeffrey, showed in 2021, the Americans were in contact with Golani. They supported Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is a new name for Al-Qaeda, because Golani, at first, he was one of the directors of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. He was the deputy of Ayman, I forgot the name, and of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as well. And what the US, ex-US ambassador in Iraq said in an interview that he gave in 2021, he said that by supporting Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, we were supporting Israelis, supporting the Turks, supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, and on the other hand, by them, we were trying to stop a Russian Assad Iranian victory, and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham picked up on them. Now, Syria, since 2011 to November 2024, was placed under some of the most horrible sanctions in the history of the Middle East. Syrians couldn't buy even food. The Syrian state survived thanks to Russian and Iranian help. Russians were delivering wheat, Iranians were delivering oil for free. But as soon as the government of Assad was toppled, there was no revolution in Syria. There was a CIA organized regime change, and for as soon as the democratically elected, yes, there were elections in Syria a few years ago. The democratically elected president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, who was not an angel, of course, but as soon as he was toppled and he was replaced by the emir of ISIS for Nineveh province, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani was the person who was sending suicide bombers to kill people in their homes. As soon as he came to power, the Americans, they started to remove their sanctions against Syria. They allowed humanitarian aid, and suddenly we had an internationally wanted terrorist who's being treated as if he was Nelson Mandela or Yasser Arafat. But now, what is going on? Why had the government of Syria to go? Here is an interview by Wesley Clark. He was the US NATO commander for Europe who bombed Yugoslavia, and he has revealed to us why Syria had to be destroyed. After September 11, 2001, George Bush, the son, not his father, we will have the bombing of the Twin Towers, which most of intellectuals of this planet believe that it was organized by the Americans themselves. And immediately after September 11, the Americans came up with plans to go to war against 7 countries in the next 5 years. So which were these countries? We can see it here.
It's a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries.
Now we have here President Donald Trump, the US president who is going to take office in 2 days from now. A week ago, he posted this video of Professor Jeffrey Sachs, where Professor Sachs says openly that the toppling of the Syrian government was ordered by President Obama in 2011, and this follows the 1995 Netanyahu theory. The theory of nowadays Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been that for Zionism to triumph over Islam and the Palestinians, the Americans had to topple all those governments which supported Hamas and Hezbollah.
War in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, starting 4 years before Russia intervened. What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow? Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It was the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that, and the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you. Because he's got the sensible terms.
And now, so this was with the British and the Americans. A few days ago, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel published this map, and it didn't remove it even after Jordan protested, where Israel shows that Jordan is part of Israel according to their biblical maps. And the latest news that we have is that after getting rid of Syria, after destroying Iraq, Libya, and all the neighboring Arab countries of Palestine, Israel, its war commission, known as the Nagel Commission, is preparing for a possible war against Turkey. And as we know, the Israeli genocide in Gaza continues. But before I close my lecture, I want to bring into your attention that the first time when the Zionist leadership identified Syria, Russia, Iraq, Iran, and Libya as countries that they had to be destroyed, it's not the year 1995, but it is the year 1979, when I was just 2 years old, and probably many of you were not in this dunya, but you were probably in Alamul Ruh. So this is a book compiled by the present Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. You can see his name. And the title is International Terrorism Challenge and Response. There was a conference which was organized in Israel, in Jerusalem, in 1979. The conference was chaired by the father of Benjamin Netanyahu, Benzion Netanyahu. His real name is Benzion Meliovsky. But these Slavs, when they immigrate to Israel, they change their names because they don't want people to understand that they are not Jews, but they are Slavs. And in these conference proceedings, you are going to see people like George Bush, the eldest, who will later become even the president of United States, who will participate, and they will all identify which are the terrorist states that Israel and the United States have to go after. So these terrorist states, they are those states who were supporting the Palestinians, and you can read the names. The Soviet bloc countries, China and North Vietnam, the radical Arab states, Libya, Syria, Iraq, South Yemen, Algeria, and Iran. And the main culprit are the Russians. And when Sheikh Imran Hosein predicts that at the end of time, in our Akhirul Zaman, we will witness a major war between Russia and the Zionists, he is perfectly right. This has been foreseen and foretold to us by the Zionists many decades before we were even born. Thank you very much. This is my presentation.
Thank you very much. Shukran to Dr. Olsi for so beautifully rendering his presentation. Dr. Olsi, of course, covering the socio-political as well as the historical and international relations dimension. Inshallah, we now commence to the next part. And very soon we will also have the details being shown on the screen, and there will be a few members of our MSC during the presentation. There were some logistical impediments. We couldn't hear the sound for the first George Bush, his video. I think the CIA may be infiltrated during the presentation. There were some logistical impediments. We couldn't hear the sound for the first George Bush, his video. I think the CIA may be infiltrated. An expert in the subject and a senior academic at the Islamic University in Malaysia from Albania originally. We now hand over to our beloved Sheikh Imran Hosein, who will now cover the Islamic.
Rahim. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise and on Moses and on Jesus, the Messiah, and on his mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and on the last of them all, whether they accept it or they don't, the Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon them all. As we greet you on this, the 18th day of the month of Rajab in the year 1446, from the auditorium of the Islamic College in Cape Town in South Africa, with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and with the dua, because this is the month of Rajab, and next month is the month of Shaban. We're not concerned with Dajjal's months, the false Messiah. We're talking about the month with the Lord God. There's only one Lord God. And he gave us the moon, to count the months and the years. And we greet you on this, the 18th day of the month of Rajab, because next month is Shaban, and after that is the month of Ramadan. And that's the month in which the Quran came down. They may say it's the Torah which came down on the other side of the mountain. Oh, no. They all came down on this side of the mountain. And so we make the dua, Allahumma barik lana fi Rajabin wa Shaban. O Allah, kindly grant us blessings. We are a people who pray to Him, while others don't. O Allah, kindly grant us blessings in this month of Rajab and in the month of Shaban, which is to come, and grant that we might live to see Ramadan. Our topic today is one of more than passing importance. Regime change is just taking place in Syria, and the implications, the Islamic eschatological implications, are first of all, and most important of all, implications for Jerusalem. Of course, everybody understands that. It is all connected with Jerusalem. Islamic eschatology tells us that there are two cities which are pivotally important for the end of history. The first, of course, is Jerusalem, and I wrote Jerusalem in the Quran some 20-something years ago. Many of you may have already read that book. But the second city is Constantinople. And that's important because our prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, prophesied that a Muslim army will conquer Constantinople. When I met with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow last February, and I used the name Constantinople, he stopped me. He says, I am so happy that you're using the name Constantinople. A Muslim army will conquer Constantinople. And he praised the commander, and he praised the army. But I don't think Erdogan in Turkey, the Sultan Erdogan in Turkey is too comfortable about this prophecy. And the prophecy about the conquest of Constantinople by a Muslim army, not a Russian army, not a Christian army, a Muslim army, because we don't want to provoke civil war in the house of religion. The prophecy is that the Muslim army will conquer Constantinople shortly after the Great War. Christian eschatology speaks about the Great War. Jewish eschatology, I believe, also speaks about the Great War. And they call it Armageddon. And our prophet called it the Malhama. And it is a war to be fought over a mountain of gold. And BRICS is now taking us to that war. You must do the thinking now. That war has not as yet taken place, but our prophet prophesied, as only a prophet of God could prophesy, that 99 out of every 100, it's a figure of speech, who fight for that mountain of gold would be killed. So this cannot be a conventional war. This has to be a war using weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons or something else beyond that. And that war has not as yet taken place, but it's around the corner. It's around the corner. And perhaps the imminent collapse of Ukraine might provoke that war. And when that war takes place, then he said that the next event to occur would be the conquest of Constantinople by a Muslim army. And I have offered an interpretation, an explanation. And when I offer my view, of course, you must know, don't ever accept my view unless and until you are convinced that I am correct, because this is my respect for your intellectual independence. That we will conquer Constantinople for a number of reasons. One of them is that it was manifestly shameful, disgraceful, and sinful that a Christian cathedral, which had functioned as a Christian cathedral, one of the foremost in the world after Jerusalem, for 1,000 years, Hagia Sophia, should be converted to a masjid by the Ottoman Empire and then reconverted to a masjid by the Sultan Erdogan. I said it was shameful. I said it was disgraceful. I said it was manifestly sinful. Because in the Quran, listen carefully, the Lord God has given us an obligation to protect the synagogue, even if we have to fight to protect it. The church, the cathedral. Are you listening to me? Or the propaganda against Islam on behalf of the Jewish state of Israel? The propaganda has been going on for so long, and Dr. Olsi is one of the foremost authorities to explain it and to reveal it and to preserve it. This is what the Quran says. Fight, even if you have to fight, to protect the synagogue, to protect the church, to protect the cathedral, to protect the masjid. Surah Al-Hajj. And because they changed the cathedral and converted it to a masjid, to the eternal shame and disgrace of this community of Muslims. That's why a Muslim army will have to conquer Constantinople, and no one can stop it. Don't try. Not even Donald Trump. And when we conquer Constantinople, we will return Hagia Sophia to those to whom it rightfully belongs. And when we return Hagia Sophia, then the friendship and the alliance between those who follow the true Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, Maryam, and those who follow Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessing be upon them both, that friendship and alliance would be sealed. And when that friendship and alliance is sealed, then those who still reject Jesus as the Messiah will then reach the end of their road. There's nothing left for them. And this prophecy of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is now approaching fulfillment, because events are unfolding in Syria, a jigsaw puzzle which is tremendously intricate, difficult to understand. The pieces are coming together. And Jerusalem is at the center stage. And Constantinople is also connected with Jerusalem in the end time as the two most important cities in the end time. But when I was in Moscow in February, and we had the meeting with the Russian foreign minister, and he was only talking about politics and economics and monetary economics, and we were a small group, about 15, and I interrupted to ask, can we talk about the Quran and Russia? Everything became silent, because the Russians are very, very serious when it comes to religion. And they were not always comfortable and happy with Islam. Well, no, because the Ottoman Empire waged I don't know how many thousand wars against Russia. And after I had spoken to him for some time of what the Quran has to say about Russia, he then asked me, can you write on the subject? I then spent the next few months writing the Quran and Russia's destiny. And when writing that book, I realized that no, it was not two. It was three cities which will dominate the end of history. And Moscow is the third, not Washington. And the pieces are coming together now. The Arab Spring led to the destruction of Libya. Libya was a regime which was resisting Israeli oppression. This is not a seminar organized to lash out at Jews, not at all. There are Jews in the world who have the common sense and who have the internal integrity to recognize that there is oppression in Israel. And it was wonderful to see them protesting on American university campuses, to the embarrassment of the Zionist movement. American students protesting against violence and oppression against the Palestinians. So there are Jews who oppress, who oppose oppression in Israel. And they are our brothers when they oppose oppression. And then the oppression of the state of Israel reaches a crescendo, reaches a point from which there is no return now. It's not possible to retrace your steps anymore. And now we see regime change in Syria taking us one significant step forward towards an end that Islamic eschatology has already explained and is connected with the Messiah. It'll take hours to explain an Islamic eschatological explanation of the Messianic interpretation of history. an Islamic eschatological explanation of the Messianic interpretation of history. But to cut the long story short, Allah promised to the Bani Israel, to the Israelite people, He promised them that He would send them one who would be their prophet, not ours, theirs. And He would be the Messiah. And He would bring back the golden age when the Israelite people ruled the world from Holy Israel in Jerusalem. With the prophets David, Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, and Solomon, Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, that Israel was a ruling state. And our prophet prophesied when the Messiah came, and some of them accepted Him, and the others rejected Him because they said, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْهَا, he's a bastard. His mother was not married. Allah tested them, and they failed the test because they could see with only external sight, and they're internally blind. All those who worship gold, and when gold becomes a golden calf, are becoming internally blind. All those who worship gold, and when gold is transformed into a golden calf, they are internally blind. That's the price you pay for worshiping gold. And so, the state of Israel is pursuing a mission to restore rule over the world, because that's what the original Israel did. When they rejected the Messiah, and they did more than that, they boasted of how they killed the Messiah. It's in the Quran, so don't accuse me of anti-Semitism. It's in the Quran. You want to accuse the Quran of anti-Semitism? Go ahead and do it. So now they are waiting for a Messiah to come. And that Messiah has to cause Israel to become a ruling state in the world. And when he does that, then he could stand up in Jerusalem and declare, I am the Messiah. But our prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, prophesied, no. Allah created a false Messiah who would impersonate the true Messiah. And that false Messiah will take them for a ride. And that's what he's doing now. He has, number one, he has to bring the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own 2,000 years after they had been driven out. Has he done that? Yes. Number two, he has to restore a state of Israel in the Holy Land. Has he done that? Yes, in 1948. Number three, he has to cause that state of Israel to replace the United States of America as the third and the last ruling state in the world. Now let's go to the Quran. And to go to Surah Al-Mursalat. And in Surah Al-Mursalat, Allah speaks about a shadow. And the shadow will constitute of three parts. And this, therefore, has to be something which has to be interpreted to be understood. And our interpretation is that the shadow is the false Messiah, and he will come with a profile of 3 parts. When I wrote Jerusalem in the Quran, I said in part 1 he produced Pax Britannica. You know Pax Britannica in South Africa, oh yes. We know it, when all your gold and all your diamonds and all your precious metals were stolen from you by thieves who had no shame at all. Stolen from you. And then, not only did Pax Britannica pave the way for a state of Israel to be established in Jerusalem by the false Messiah, but it gave way to a Pax Americana, which made Israel strong, powerful. They were always arguing, we are simply struggling to give a home to a people who don't have a home. That's all. That was not true at all. What they were doing was to try to build and establish a state of Israel which would eventually try to rule the world. Because our prophet prophesied that when the Messiah returns, because he came, and they saw him, now listen carefully to my words, they saw him crucified on the cross before their very eyes. I did not say he was crucified. No. I said they saw him crucified on the cross before their very eyes. Is that what I said? And they saw it because Allah made it appear like that. And if you were there, you would see him crucified. And if I was there, I would see him crucified. But no, Allah says, no, he did not die, he was not crucified. But Allah made it appear like that. And Allah raised him unto himself. And so he came and he left and will return. And Allah's messenger said, when he comes back, he will come back as an Hakimul Adil, someone who will rule, and will rule with justice. So the Messiah who will stand up in Jerusalem tomorrow, declaring, I am the Messiah, but he would not be, he would be Dajjal, he has to show them that I'm ruling the world. And in order to do that, he has to show them that I'm ruling the Arab world first. If you want to rule the world from Jerusalem, you've got to start by ruling the Arab world. And if you want to rule the Arab world, you start with Libya. Because Saudi Arabia, I used to say that Saudi Arabia and Israel were sisters 25 years ago, but I was wrong. 25 years ago, they were only cousins. Now they're sisters. Now they're sisters. Why don't you smile? What's wrong with you? Escape on. 25 years ago, Saudi Arabia and Israel were only cousins. Now they're sisters. And all the rest of the Arab countries, not the people, the governments, not the people, the governments, must be in a state of submission to Israel. And all those who resist Israel must be destroyed. And that's why you now have Trump in Washington to finish up the job. Every single country within that region which is resisting Israel must be destroyed. Why? So that Israel can show the world we rule the Arab world. The whole Arab world is now in submission to us, so now it's only the rest of the world. And so Libya went, and Iraq went. You know the story, the bogus story. They tell lies. Oh my gosh, these people tell lies without any embarrassment. Without any embarrassment. As though there is no such thing as moral integrity in them. None. They tell lies. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So Desert Storm to destroy Iraq, to destroy Libya. And because Syria was resisting Israel, and Russia had intervened to save and to support the Syrian regime, because there are Christians in Syria. And if you allow these jihadists with weapons supplied by the Israeli Mossad and weapons supplied by the CIA and all the American dollars and so on, if they take over, there will be a slaughter. They will slaughter all the Christians. So Russia intervened to try to save Syria from becoming another Libya. And for the last 10 years, the struggle was going on. And so you had October the 7th, was it? 2023. And did you know the secret? How all the weapons reached to Gaza? Did anyone tell you? How all the drones reached to Gaza? I'm telling you the secret with Santa Claus. Yeah, it was Santa Claus. But Hamas, they don't know about Santa Claus. They didn't know who was sending the weapons. And they believed it was coming from the heavens above. And they were being set up. There will be a judgment day when the truth will be revealed and I'll be validated. They wanted to have another 9/11. There are three kinds of lies, I used to say. There are normal lies, and then there are great lies, and then there is 9/11. You commit a monstrous act of terrorism, and then you blame it on your enemy. And then you exploit this act of terrorism to advance your political and military agenda. That's what they did in 9/11. That's what the government of Israel did from September the 7th. The rest, you can think it out. And one of the first objectives was to destroy Hamas. I don't use the term Hamas. I call them the Islamic resistance. They know how to fight. I admire them for their spirit, but they don't have much upstairs. They're more peanuts upstairs, like Afghanistan. Afghanistan knows how to fight, but Afghanistan doesn't have the intellectual capacity to understand what is being done. And so they have succeeded in inflicting grievous wounds on Hamas as well as on Hezbollah. And now they are boasting. The Israeli government is boasting. We have succeeded in regime change in Syria, which means that it was the Israeli Mossad at work. And so these jihadists, I choose my words carefully, which have taken over Syria, are Israel's puppy dogs. That's right. And it was not only Israel boasting, but also Biden. Before he says goodbye, he wanted to have a good show. And he's boasting that we have succeeded with regime change in Syria, which means that the CIA was involved. So Cape Town, when you start celebrating the fall of Assad, just remember that while Assad was there, despite whatever be his failings, while Assad was there, at least Syria was resisting Israeli oppression. And now Syria is in a state of submission. And all that now remains is Iran and Yemen. All the rest are in submission. And Israel is advancing towards that day when the entire region, the environment in which Israel is located, will all be in a state of submission to Israel. Now then, our prophet prophesied before the Messiah returns that Allah Most High would send someone who will revive this world of Islam, which is now cluttered with 50-something so-called Muslim countries, and reunify the whole world of Islam as one holy state, the Khilafah state. And he is known as the Imam al-Mahdi. He said that a Muslim ruler would die, a Khalifa. And when he dies, there would be disagreement concerning succession. 25, 30 years ago, I suggested it's going to be a Saudi king. And it appears now that when Salman dies, that the disagreement will commence. I don't know for how long it will continue, because not all the Saudi family like this MBS, Salman's son. During that time of disagreement concerning succession, a man will come out of Medina and hurry to Mecca. And in Mecca, he will declare himself to be the Mahdi. When that happens, that is the last significant threat to Israel. Because this man is going to restore the Khilafah state and unify the world of Islam. When he declares himself to be the Mahdi, then our prophet said that an army will come from Damascus to attack him. And so long as Assad was there, we could not truly understand how this will take place. An army will come from Damascus to attack the Mahdi. And when that army has crossed Medina and is on its way to Mecca, in between Medina and Mecca, the earthquake will occur. The earth will open and swallow that army. And that is a sign confirming this is not a bogus CIA Mahdi. This is the true Mahdi. And so now, from Cape Town, on the occasion of this seminar, we are able to anticipate with some clarity that those who now have taken over power in Damascus will continue to control Damascus until that day. And it is that army of Israel's puppy dogs who will come to attack the Mahdi. And that army will be swallowed by the earth when it opens. The army of the Mahdi will eventually succeed in taking control of the Arab Peninsula. And that's goodbye to Saudi Arabia. when the Mahdi comes, goodbye to Saudi Arabia. I was in Manhattan lecturing on this topic 30 years ago, and I was not aware that the Kuwaiti ambassador was sitting right in front of me. I didn't know that. And I said, when the Mahdi comes, goodbye to Saudi Arabia, goodbye to Kuwait. Yes. Because now a Khilafah state will be established in Mecca. But there is parallel to this something else that will be taking place, and that is the Great War. And he prophesied that the Great War will be triggered because of something occurring in the north of Syria. It is so puzzling, it's difficult to anticipate what's going to happen. Because as Dr. Olsi has correctly explained just now, you have so many different forces at work. Israel is an actor in Syria now. The Israeli army is an actor in Israel. The Turkish army is an actor in Israel at this time. The American armed forces are actors in Israel at this time. In Syria at this time. The Israeli puppy dogs who control Damascus, they are an actor in Syria at this time. And they don't want Russia to leave. The Americans want them to tell the Russians, pack up and get out, close down your bases. But now they're saying to the Russians, please stay. So Russia is still an actor, a military actor in Syria. So it's a complex situation there, and the most cunning of all actors involved in this is Erdogan. And we don't know, he plays, both sides because his objective is to restore an Ottoman Empire. I don't want to spend all the time left with me, I only have a few minutes left, with expanding more on an Islamic eschatological explanation of the implications of regime change. But Russia has a strategic role to play in Syria. And that has to be understood from the Quran. And you have to go to Surah Rum of the Quran to understand what is the role that Russia has to play remaining in Syria. Russia today is the most powerful military force in the world. I said this many years ago. They thought I was dreaming. No, now they're recognizing. If Russia did not have this military power, there would have been regime change in Venezuela long ago. Oh yes. Why did Russia and Iran not come to the help of Assad to save his regime? Let me answer that question and we'll end. What happened in Syria, regime change in Syria, was connected with Ukraine. The modern West cannot allow Russia to defeat Ukraine. No. The implications for world politics will be too much for them. It will be too serious a loss for the modern West, too embarrassing for Russia to defeat Ukraine. But Ukraine is on the verge of collapse. And you have a new American president who is saying, or he used to say it, I will stop that war in one day. Maybe now he's saying 1 year. But it is now clear that the war in Ukraine cannot continue indefinitely. And so what to do? How to save us from this tremendous embarrassment? How can we get Ukraine off the hook? Answer, Israel's puppy dogs were told when to attack. And the plan appears to me to have been to try to put a bait for Russia and Iran to intervene to save Assad. And if Russia and Iran had taken that bait, then NATO would have intervened. And then you had a big war. And Ukraine would have been saved. But Russia saw the plan. And Russia said, I'm not intervening. And Russia advised Iran not to intervene. Russia preferred to sacrifice Assad rather than to lose the opportunity of victory in Ukraine. And Trump was not at all happy about that, at all. Trump was very disappointed. So when Assad was told, Russia is not going to intervene to save you, Iran is not going to intervene, he said, there's no sense continuing the bloodshed. So he packed up and he left, and the Syrian armed forces said, no need to continue to fight, there's no sense. And that's why the takeover of Syria took place so quickly without so much bloodshed. And the implication, therefore, of regime change in Syria is there's nothing left now to save Ukraine. I thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In the language of our forefathers, Bayit Ramakasi, to Sheikh Imran Hosein, as well as to Dr. Olsi for so beautifully giving their presentations covering the subject of the Islamic eschatological dimensions and implications, rather, of regime change. Years, alhamdulillah, and we've always opened our platform to various scholars, both locally and internationally, to benefit as young people. And many young people in the audience, students and those who were young people, everyone's left-hand side. Then there are books for sale. All of Sheikh's books are on sale outside. And if you go further, inshallah, then the refresh link will be sent for those who would like to send their questions online, inshallah. And for those who are more old style, you can write the questions and we will pose the questions through. Makasi to everyone for coming for the first session, and we call upon everyone to go outside to please buy of Sheikh's books, inshallah, on various subjects, and inshallah to enjoy and then we will pose a question through to Sheikh. You can write down your questions for the time being, and we'd like to encourage everyone, as Uncle Fakhri, our senior, always advises both Sheikh as well as Dr. Olsi to answer, or either Sheikh or Dr. Olsi to answer, inshallah. Once those pieces of paper, those pieces of paper or the pen. And then immediately, once we have the first questions coming through, we will pose them to Sheikh and Dr. Olsi. Does Indonesia play and Malaysia play in the big war? Let me repeat. What role, I should actually read, what role will Indonesia and Malaysia play in the Great War?
Does not indicate whether it's a question for me or for Dr. Usli. So they did not indicate who is answering. So Dr. Usli will answer, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. And look, we have to see the geography. Malaysia and Indonesia, they're very far from Palestine. They do not have borders. Well, what Malaysia and Indonesia does is they have shown solidarity with the Palestinians. And there is something that you have to understand. In Malaysia, political Islam is tolerated. Malaysia is one of the best countries where you can practice Islam nowadays. Islam is part of state institutions, is an official religion, and the reason why Islam is tolerated in Malaysia is because the British and the Americans, they have no interest on fighting against Muslims in Malaysia and in Indonesia. In that part of the world, their greatest concern is the influence of China. So when the Malaysian state was established, for those who know history, the British, they sided with Muslim Malays, and they used Islam in Malaysia in order to fight the threat of communism. But when it comes to Palestine, I don't think that Malaysia and Indonesia can do much. They are on the other side of our planet, and this is how I see the situation.
The Sheikh comment on the current ceasefire in Palestine. I repeat, can Sheikh comment on the current ceasefire in Palestine? It goes further. Why does Israel want a ceasefire now? Why do they want to continue to fight the regime?
I cannot comment on the ceasefire until I have studied it. I have not as yet studied it yet.
The next question. Ya Allah. Kan jy die uitmaak hè? I'll go to the next question in the meanwhile. I'm going to ask my senior Uncle Fakhri just to tafsir that bottom part there. Let's go to the next one. This is directed both to Sheikh and to Doctor. What role will Iran and Yemen play in the end times? What role will Iran and Yemen play in the end times? Both to Doctor and Sheikh.
Me? What role does Yemen and Iran play in the end time? Yemen is easy, because our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, was passing by and he saw some of his companions sitting and talking, and he asked, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "We are talking about alama to sa'a, the signs of the last day." He then said the last day would not come, and he mentioned 10 signs. But the 10 are not given in the chronological sequence in which they will occur. Number 1, Dajjal. Number 2, Gog and Magog. Number 3, the return of the son of Maryam, Nabi Isa alayhi salam. Number 4, Dukhan or smoke. Number 5, Dabbatul Ard. There's a book of mine on Dabbatul Ard outside on Dajjal, the Quran, and the Jasad. That book that deals with Dabbatul Ard. Number 6, that the sun will rise from the west. Number 7, 8, and 9, 3 earthquakes in which the earth will open and swallow what it swallows. 1 in the east, 1 in the west, and the third one that I already mentioned, when the earth will swallow the army of Israel's puppy dogs. But number 10 is that a fire will come out of Yemen. A fire will come out of Yemen and drive people to their place of assembly for judgment. That cannot be a literal fire. This is language that has to be interpreted. So obviously the fire will be those in Yemen who are resisting Israeli oppression rather than those who are supporting Saudi Arabia. And those who are resisting Israeli oppression are the Houthis, and they are supported by Iran. So in view of the fact that this is one of the major signs of the last day, Iran is in good company.
Shukran, Sheikh. I don't know if Dr. Olsi would like to add on.
Yeah, since the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iranian state is a Mahdist state. They have the concept of Mahdiviyat. So they believe that at the end of time, Imam Mahdi will appear and he will mobilize Muslims to defeat Israel and Dajjal. For people who study the history of the Islamic Republic and their constitution, they believe that the Islamic Republic of Iran is the Republic of Mahdi. The 5th article of the Constitution of Iran states that the supreme leader of Iran, who is a fuqaha, is in this position until the moment when Imam Mahdi comes. And in that moment, according to the Iranian constitution, Imam Mahdi should take the leadership of the state. The reason why Iran is suffering so much is under sanctions. Its president, Raisi, was killed. Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Quds Force, or the Army of Jerusalem, was assassinated by the Americans in Baghdad. The reason why we have so many Iranian officials and generals being killed, Iran is sanctioned. Iran is threatened with a nuclear war and everything else, is because the belief of the Islamic Republic is that it is its holy mission to liberate Jerusalem and Palestine from the Zionist and Dajjal. This is the concept of Vilayat al-Faqih, which Imam Khomeini established. He made a big, if I can call it a bidah, in the Shia theology. Because in traditional Shiism, the Shias, they didn't believe in power. They believed that the power should be given to secular authorities. But when Khomeini organized his revolution against Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as a response to the process of secularization and de-Islamization of Iran, he came into a conclusion that we have to break with traditional Shia theology. We should establish the country or the state of Islam, which is ruled by the fuqaha, and this fuqaha should serve as a representative of the hidden imam. I mean, if you see nowadays what is happening in the Middle East, the battle between Israel and the Zionist empire and the axis of a resistance, it is a battle between the Messianists, because evangelical Zionists, they believe that God will bring Messiah to save the Jews from their sins. And for God to bring Messiah, they have to gather the Jews from all over the world in Palestine and to defeat the children of Ishmael. Because according to Zionist and evangelical belief, we Muslims, we are perceived as the children of a slave, of Hajar. And in their theology, they claim that they are the children of Ishaq. So according to their theology, Ishaq, who was the son of Sarah, is a son of a free woman. But we, the Muslims, are the descendants of a slave woman, Hajar. And according to their belief, and the reason why they returned to Palestine, is that they believe only in this way God is going to forgive them and to remove the curse from them. But what we are seeing is that since the establishment of Israel, wherever the Zionists have gone, curse has followed them. I mean, if somebody visits Israel, you see there is no peace in this country. These people, they cannot sleep. And facing this messianic theology that the Americans and the British and the Zionists represent, we have another theology, which is the theology of Mahdiviyat, that the Shias believe. And they believe that this is the end of time, and before the end of time, Allah will bring Imam Mahdi, who will unite and mobilize the Muslims to defeat the army of Dajjal. Iran is a very eschatological state for those who know it. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Doctor and to Sheikh. The next question.
Palestine will be free only when Mecca is free. Our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, prophesied that a Muslim army will march from Khorasan and it will be unstoppable, meaning not even Donald Trump can stop it, until it reaches Jerusalem. When that army reaches Jerusalem, then Palestine will be free. Khorasan, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, comprised a large area of territory which includes today's Iran, today's Afghanistan, the north of Pakistan, and the republics north of Afghanistan. The republics north of Afghanistan don't play any strategic role in the end time. But yes, Iran does, and Afghanistan does, and the north of Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan is the only nuclear power in the Muslim world today. At this time, the army is ready to march. But even though Iran is free, and Iran is ready to march, and Afghanistan is free, and Afghanistan is ready to march, Pakistan is not free. No. And Pakistan will not be free so long as the Pakistan armed forces control the country. I call the generals who control power in Pakistan and who've all been trained in the West and who had an ample share of whiskey and white women. I call them Yankee puppy dogs because they want to be on the side of NATO. But the Pakistani people do not want to be on the side of NATO. And that's why they have Imran Khan in prison. He is by far the most popular politician in Pakistan today. And they have to rig an election to keep him out. So yes, the army will march to liberate Jerusalem whenever Pakistan is free. And then you'll have all three. You have Iran, you have Afghanistan, and you have Pakistan, and then the republics north of Pakistan, which constitute ancient Khorasan, will give us that army which will liberate Jerusalem, inshallah.
Shukran, Sheikh. The next question, by the way, that answered 3 other questions here. What Sheikh said just now, that would have answered 3 other questions pertaining to where the Muslim army will come from to liberate Constantinople. I'll go to the next question before I hand over the rest of the questions. The next question, Sheikh, this is to Doctor. Why does Saudi Arabia do nothing for Palestine or other Muslim countries for that matter? Is it because they are descendants of Jews? And how will Israel get Saudi Arabia as part of Greater Israel? That's to you, Dr. Olsi.
Well, people have to read history and to understand who created Saudi Arabia. There was no Saudi Arabia in the history of mankind, but during World War I, when the Ottomans were defeated, we had Emir Sharif Hosein, who was the Sharif of Mecca, the person who led the so-called the Arab rebellion against the Ottomans with Lawrence of Arabia after he was recruited by the British High Commissioner in Egypt, Henry McMahon. The British promised to Sharif Hussein that once we topple the Ottomans, we will make you the Caliph of Islam and you will create an Arab Caliphate. When World War I finished, Sharif Hussein understood that the British had cheated him. In the peace conference of Versailles, there was no Arab Caliphate created. And moreover, in the Sanremo conference, which came after, the British divided the Arab world with the French, and there was no caliphate established. And after the Sanremo conference and the Paris or the Versailles conference, the British went to Sharif Hussein and they asked him to sign the decisions of these two conferences, and in exchange they promised to him 30,000 pounds, which was big money in the time. Sharif Hussein refused this, and on March the 3rd, 1924, when Ataturk abolished the caliphate, Sharif Hussein came in conflict with the last Ottoman Sultan, and with his blessing, the last Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed VI, sent him a telegram and appointed him as the next Caliph of Islam. Now, look, nowadays we claim to be Sunnis, but according to classical Islam, we're not. We're Protestants. What is the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant? A Protestant is someone who has no pope. A Catholic, for those who know Christianity, is someone who has a pope. And Sunni Islam, since its creation by Abu Bakr, was meant to be that part of Islam where Muslims had their leader who was the caliph of the community. And Sunnis from the time of Abu Bakr to the Umayyads, to the Abbasids, and to Ottomans, always they had a caliph somewhere, even though this caliph could have been, probably he was not a very pious person, still the idea that we have a pope was always there for Sunni Islam. During the late years of the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Abdul Hamid and the great Muslim intellectual Jamaluddin al-Afghani, and you have even in India the Khilafah movement, they propagated a lot the concept of the caliph. The caliph as the leader or the global leader of Islam. Abdul Hamid, he even co-opted a number of Shia ulama, mullahs, who were propagating during the era of Qajar Shahs in Iran, the concept that the Sultan of Istanbul is the leader, the global leader of Islam and the caliph. Now, I want to come to Saudi Arabia. So what happens in March 1924, when Ataturk officially abolishes the caliphate, Sharif Hussein declares himself caliph. And this thing alarmed the Zionists. Now, what the British had done is that while they didn't give the Arab Caliphate to Sharif Hussein, he was recognized as the king of Hijaz. So there was a kingdom into what we know nowadays as Saudi Arabia from 1916 to 1924, known as Al-Mamlaka Al-Hashimiyya, the Hashemite kingdom of Hijaz, which was in the cities that we know like Taif, Mecca, Medina, Aqaba, and what have you, Western Saudi Arabia. Now, when the British learned that Sharif Hussein is not obeying to them, they order the Sultan of Najd, Abdulaziz bin Saud, they go and give him money, they even gave him tanks, and they told him go and attack and destroy the kingdom of Hijaz. In December 1924, with the support and money of the British, he attacks Mecca and Medina, and the kingdom of Hijaz came to an end. And from 1924 until 1930, after Abdulaziz will unite the kingdom of Hijaz officially and the kingdom of Najd, and it will become Saudi Arabia, the Saudi state was supported by the British. And for those who know the history of Saudi states, we have 3 Saudi states. The first one, which took control of Mecca and Medina in 1805, and they declared the Ottoman Sultan to be a kafir, and all Muslims who were not Salafi, Wahhabi were declared to be kafirs. And the Ottoman Sultan, he had to send, to order Mehmet Ali of Egypt to send his son Ibrahim and Tosun Pasha to invade Al-Darija and to destroy this Takfiri state. So in its origin, the Saudi state was created as a Takfiri state that stood against the Sunni Islam, which was the Ottoman Caliph. And then from 1924 to this day, the Saudi state, for those people, I don't have the laptop now connected, but there is a very nice video by Muammar al-Gaddafi, you can see that, when he once told to one of these Saudi kings that you are created by the British and you are protected by the Americans. So this state was created as an agent against the power of Islam in the world of Islam. Like the Sheikh said before, that Saudi Arabia is the sister of Israel. He's very, very correct. Today, the 3 holy mosques of Islam are under occupation by non-Muslim powers. And the mission of the Saudi state, since its creation, has been not to allow the establishment of the caliphate. Maybe some of you might be surprised about what I'm saying, because most of us here, we were born in an era when there was no organized Sunni Islam under a caliph. And as I said before, most of us were like Protestants here, okay? So I'm a Sunni. Why I'm a Sunni? Because I pray like a Sunni and I follow Sunni books. But this is not what Sunnism was 100 years ago. There was another concept. And why Saudi Arabia stands against Palestine? Simple, because they are agents. They are there because the British and the Americans and the Zionists want them to be there. And this is their 100-year history. And for people who study Ottoman history, the Ottoman ulamas even declared their ideology to be non-Islamic. And they declared them as murtads, or traitors of Islam. But today, because of Saudi money, because they control Mecca and Medina, we're very happy when we go there, because we don't know history. And sometimes being ignorant is not that bad, because you live happy.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Something more to what Dr. Olsi has just mentioned. In 1916, the British succeeded in recruiting their puppy dogs. Hosein bin Ali, who had been appointed by the Ottomans as the Sharif of Mecca, became their puppy dog. And the British paid him £7 million to become their puppy dog. And in 1916, they signed a treaty with Abdulaziz ibn Saud, a treaty of alliance. So the Saudi betrayal was way, way back when. And I have a book outside entitled The Caliphate, the Hijaz, and the Saudi Wahhabi nation state. And in that book, you'll get a figure. I don't remember how much they paid. How much they paid Ibn Saud to become their puppy dog. Maybe it was £5,000 a month or 500,000. Well, you'll get the information in that book. It was written 20-something years ago. Secondly, when the caliphate was abolished, by Mustafa Kemal on March the 3rd or 4th? March 4th? 1924. Then Hosein bin Ali claimed the caliphate in Mecca. And then the British used Ibn Saud to march on Hosein bin Ali because the British didn't want the caliphate to be restored. And he had to be taken in exile to Cyprus. But now there's no caliphate, no Khilafah. So how is the Sunni world of Islam going to respond? Al-Azhar University responded and decided that we must hold a conference to determine what to do and how to appoint a new caliphate, Khilafah. And they decided to have the conference scheduled for 1926. The subject was so difficult and complex, that's why you have so much time. Ibn Saud, although he declared, I am now the champion of Islam, he did not want the caliphate to be restored. And you cannot have a caliphate, you cannot have a khilafah unless he controls the Hajj. And Ibn Saud is controlling the Hajj. So Ibn Saud wants to sabotage the conference organized by Al-Azhar University in 1926. How to sabotage it? Britain helped him. And he decided to have a rival conference in Mecca and to hold it on the occasion of the Hajj. And he succeeded in recruiting more delegates from all over the world of Islam than the Al-Hajj conference which took place in Cairo. All of this information is in my book. And when the conference took place in Mecca, the king came to the conference and addressed the conference twice. He did not want the Khilafah to be restored. No. And you'll find the evidence in the book that the delegates from India appointed Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar to speak on behalf of all the delegates. And that man got up and with formidable courage and integrity, he told the king to get lost. But you did not have power. Britain had power. Britain was the ruling state in the world. And Britain was backing Ibn Saud. And that's why Ibn Saud was successful in taking control of the Hijaz in 1924. In 1924. And then it was 1936 he appointed the Saudi Arabia?
1932.
35?
32.
32. The kingdom of Hijaz and the Sultanate of Najd were joined together in 1932 to create the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Ibn Saud met with Roosevelt in the Suez Canal area. The American warship brought the American president into that Suez Canal area. And Ibn Saud was taking an American warship to meet with Roosevelt to compact the seal, the alliance. So that's why I said Israel and Saudi Arabia, sisters.
Shukran to Sheikh and to Doctor. This is the last question that I will pose because it directly relates to the topic, and then Uncle Fakhri will take over. I would like to indicate to everyone that inshallah we will be concluding within the next half hour. So after Uncle Fakhri is done asking the next set of questions.
The checkmating of Gog and Magog is not going to take place over one day. No, it's a slow motion checkmating, and it has already commenced. And that is that Gog and Magog are not capable anymore of inflicting a defeat on Russia in Ukraine. The checkmating has already commenced, and one of the reasons why Assad was sacrificed was because Russia wants to complete the checkmating in Ukraine. And it's going to be very interesting 2 days from now when Trump takes over in Washington, because he has a promise to the American people. We've been boasting, I can solve the problem in 1 day. So if he does not show, as soon as he becomes president, any interest and any effort to try to bring about a ceasefire in Ukraine, the American people are going to turn against him so fast, maybe faster than Federal Express. But Trump is going to try to, it's called elbowing, the way a bully operates, elbowing, to try to elbow his way with Russia, because Trump is the ultimate con man. And when he attempts to elbow his way with Russia, he will find, to his surprise, it's not going to work. The war is going to continue until Russia defeats Ukraine or Ukraine agrees to submit to Russia's demands. Either one or the other, it is already checkmate. So the checkmating of Gog and Magog has already commenced in the region of the Black Sea. The strategic partnership, is it, with Iran, which has just been signed, Dr. Olsi is far more competent to comment on that than I have, so I hand over to him.
Agreement that was signed between Russia and Iran.
Yeah, should I comment on that? Yeah, I mean, the agreement, there was a strategic agreement signed between Russia and Iran, but is mainly an economic agreement. Russia, now that is isolated, it needs Iran to face what we can call in classical historical terms as the continental blockade. We know in history of wars that Europeans had fought with the Russians. They have historically put sanctions on Russia, and this is not the first time. And because Russia now is looking towards Asia, they need access to the warm waters of the Persian Gulf in order to export their products. But the agreement was not a military one, it was not a political one, something that has disappointed the Iranians, because Russia has another agreement with Belarus where it has undertaken the responsibility to defend Belarus in case of a war, but they didn't do this with Iran. We don't know what is the reason and what is being played behind.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. So I've got to take over. Maulana, to both of you, the question. There are answers and actual possibility.
Okay, it's for me, it's okay. You want me? Well, I think it is a possibility, because if we see the history of Israel, Israel since its creation has always gone to war with all its neighbors. And now what happened in November and December 2024, it was one of the most treacherous acts in the history of modern Turkey that Turkey ever did. By supporting al-Nusra and toppling the government of Bashar al-Assad, Erdogan gave to Netanyahu the greatest victory of the latest conflict. That we can call this the fifth Arab or Islamic Israeli war. And this was the longest war in the history of Israel. It was for 15 months. And at the very moment when Hezbollah and Lebanon, they signed a ceasefire with Israel, at the very same day, al-Nusra started its attack against Syria. But now what happened is, like the Sheikh mentioned before, the issue of Syria was probably meant as a trap for Russia and Iran, and they both didn't fall into this trap. Now, which country is supposed to take care of Syria in this moment is Turkey. And Israel, I showed you during my presentation the Nagel report, Israeli government has already made war plans to attack Turkey. And if Israel will be threatened by Turkey, if Turkey will stop the expansionist plans of Israel towards Syria, mark my words, Israel will, number one, kill Turks. Already they probably have killed Turks in Syria, but they might also bomb Turkey one day. Now, we know that Turkey is a NATO member country. For people who know Turkish politics, the late Necmettin Erbakan, the person who brought Erdogan to power, he accused him before dying. He claimed that Erdogan sold Islam to the Zionists and the Masons. Whatever Erdogan speaks, if we see the real actions of Turkey, Turkey is a loyal member of NATO. During the Israeli genocide in Gaza, it was Turkey, together with Azerbaijan, through the port of Ceyhan, that was supplying oil to the Israeli military machine. But even though Turkey serves to the Zionist agenda, and we should not also forget that Turkey was established as a country, as a state, as a secular Kemalist state, by the British and the French after World War I, and after the British, they changed their mind about Turkey, fearing the Soviets. Because after the end of the civil war in Soviet Union, the Soviets will capture Baku, Azerbaijan, and the British and the French, they feared that next they were to invade Anatolia and turn Turkey into a Soviet republic. In order not to allow this to happen, they sponsored and supported Ataturk at the same way as they are supporting Giordani now. And throughout the Cold War, Turkey served as the most important country and army in Europe of the United States. But even though Turkey serves to NATO and to the Zionist alliance, we know what the Zionists have done in the past. People like Saddam Hussein. He was an American agent. He served to them during the Iran-Iraq war from 1980 to 1988. But at the first moment that they don't need you anymore, they come and kill you. Simple. And the predictions by the Shah that before the day of Qiyamah, Istanbul will be taken, we might not be surprised if it will be NATO which is going to invade Istanbul. And we know already that in 1915, during the War of Gallipoli, the British and the French, they tried to capture Constantinople, but they failed thanks to the German military support for the Ottomans. But they invaded Istanbul in 1918, and Istanbul was under military occupation by the British, the French, the Greeks, and the Italians until 1921-22. So we might not be surprised that if Erdogan does not obey to them, Israel might go to war against Turkey, but most probably Erdogan will do nothing, because for people who follow Turkish politics, you probably know what happened with the Mavi Marmara flotilla, which went to break the Gaza blockade. Israel killed many Turkish sailors, and Turkey did nothing. So they might bomb Turkey, and Erdogan might say, okay, sorry, I'm backing off.
Yes, indeed. Maulana Imran, what role will China and the Uyghur Muslims play in the end times? So is there a link between that?
My view is that there are two alliances in the end of history which will define the shift in power in the world from the Western world to a non-Western world. The first is an alliance between post-Soviet Russia. While Russia was still the Soviet Union, there could not be an alliance with China, because this was communist and that was communist, and both of them were in profound disagreement with each other. But as soon as the Soviet Union folded its tent and disappeared into the darkness of the night, and Russia began to return to her Orthodox Christian heart, the first country in the world to recognize the implications of that change was China, not the world of Islam. China. China recognized that we can now trust this Russia. Why? Because this Russia is Orthodox Christian and the Western world is Western Christian, and the two are enemies of each other. We never bothered about it, but China did. When China recognized that we can trust this Russia, China then reached out to Russia to build friendship and alliance. And Russia reciprocated. And within a short period of time, so short that the Western world woke up from sleep and said, how did this happen? That an alliance between Russia and China, which they never wanted to ever happen, has come into being. That alliance between Russia and China, number one, makes China more powerful to wage economic warfare against the West, economic oppression. China couldn't do it without the support of Russia. That's the economic one. And a relationship between China and Russia makes Russia more powerful militarily, because Russia is not standing alone. The alliance between Russia and China, therefore, has become the first event in the history of modern Western civilization where a rival has emerged powerful enough to successfully resist them. The second alliance in the end time, which will complement the alliance between Christian Russia and China, and China says it's communist, but I'll tell you a secret, China is a businessman.
Yeah.
China is a businessman. The second alliance in the end time is the alliance between Russia and the Orthodox Christian world on one hand, and the Ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam on the other hand. That's the one I am working on. These two alliances seal the fate of modern Western civilization.
Thank you. You want to?
I just want to add something. China and Russia, they have been considering each other as enemies from 1970s to early 2000. For those who have follow Russian politics, after Putin came to power, at first he was begging the West to accept Russia to join their camp, to join even NATO. Because Russia perceives China as a major threat because of its economy, because of demography and so forth. But as President Trump mentioned a few weeks ago or months ago, he said that by us provoking Russia and going into Ukraine, what Biden and the Democrats did is that they sent Russia and China to join each other against us. US politics since 1970s, which was known as the detente with communism, was to divide Russia and China, and according to their dictum of divide and rule. And they were quite successful. But with what they did to Ukraine, they forced Russia to join China against the Western Zionist Empire. Now, there is a big difference between Russia and China. Russians, because they're Ahlul Kitab, they're Christians, they understand Islam. Russians went to war against the Chechens when Chechens were funded by CIA and Wahhabis, and they wanted to separate themselves from Russia. But after defeating the insurgency, Putin made peace with Islam. The biggest mosque in Europe today is the Mosque of Grozny. And Putin made a deal with the Chechens and told them, what do we want? We want Islam, we want Sharia, we want madrasas, we want to fight because we don't want to work. Chechens, they are good for fighting. And Putin gave them whatever they wanted. And today, Muslims in Russia have more rights than Muslims in the West. They can practice Islam as they wish. And what Putin got in exchange, he got their loyalty. And if you see the war in Ukraine, some of the most famous commanders are Chechens who are fighting for Russia. And because they also understand that the war in Ukraine is a war of international Zionism against Islam and Christianity. For those who have followed when the Chechens liberated the city of Mariupol, their commanders, they were talking to the Ukrainians and they were telling to them, why do you follow the satanic ideology of Kiev? Because according to Russian National Security Council, the people who are running today Kiev, they are Satanists, and they have declared war on Christianity. Because Kiev, for Orthodox Christians like Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill, has declared Kiev is their Jerusalem, because in Kiev the Slavs were baptized by Prince Vladimir the Great. But when it comes to China, China doesn't understand the Muslims. China has discriminated Muslims of Xinjiang, the Uyghurs. They are not allowed to pray and to practice their religion. And here I have to disagree with the Shah. They have brought a de-extremification regulation in Xinjiang, where if you wear hijab, if you leave a beard, if you pray janazah, if you pray in a mosque, at least in 2019, when I visited Xinjiang, you are declared an extremist, you are arrested, and you are sent to a detention center or vocational training center, where they force you to reject Allah, to eat pork, and to pray Xi Jinping. And China has done a mistake. When I visited China in 2019, I told them, look, you have to learn from Putin. Putin had a problem with Muslim separatism as well, but the Russians were very smart because they understand Islam. This is what is the difference between Russia and the Chinese. The Chinese, because they are mushriks, they are atheists, and they're Buddhist and Confucianist, etc., they do not share the same values that we share with the Ahlul Kitabs. When I was in Xinjiang, I was telling to my Chinese friends, I was telling them how you can do this, how you can jail a woman only because she wears a hijab. And they were telling to me, no, this is against the law. I was telling them, what kind of law? We Muslims have our own religion and tradition and practice. And I told them, by doing this, you will weaponize the Uyghurs against you, and Americans are going to benefit. I hope the Chinese, they become more tolerant with the Muslims like the Russians are.
Sure. So we'll make this the last question, Sheikh Imran, directed at you. And then just to paraphrase the question, because it's quite a long question, I'll paraphrase it. The Zionist movement today, how does it equate with Ya'juj and Ma'juj? It's quite a long
Two verses in the Quran which mention Ya'juj and Ma'juj, namely Gog and Magog, by name. There are other verses which refer to Gog and Magog, but not by name. And Gog and Magog are mentioned together with Dajjal, working in tandem with Dajjal. The first verse of the Quran is in Surah Al-Kahf, and it tells us that Gog and Magog are powerful, so powerful, only Allah can destroy them. Number two, they're human beings. Number three, that they use their power to oppress and to corrupt. Number four, that they are located in the region of the Caucasus Mountains. The second verse of the Quran is in Surah Al-Anbiya and tells us that Allah destroyed a town, He expelled the people of the town, and He placed a ban on them. They could never return to that town to reclaim it as their own until Gog and Magog are released from what? Zulkarnain had contained them, checkmated them by building a barrier made of blocks of iron. And when he built that barrier, they could neither scale it nor could they penetrate it. But when Allah brings down that barrier, they'll be released. And when they are released, they'll spread out all over the world. And with their indestructible power, they take control of power in the world. And they'll use that power to oppress and to corrupt. And now listen carefully. This will happen only once in history. So if it happened and you can't recognize it, you got to go back to school. If it happened and you cannot recognize it, you got to go back to school. When they are released and they could spread out all over the world and they take control of power in the world and they oppress and they corrupt, they will bring the people back to that town. Which town is it? Allah's Messenger told us, alayhi salatu wasalam, He said that Gog and Magog will be destroyed by Allah in Jerusalem. I don't know if the rabbis know it, but we know it. And so the town is Jerusalem. So the Quran is saying that Allah destroyed Jerusalem, expelled the Jews, placed a ban on them. They could never return to reclaim Jerusalem as their own for 2,000 years. But when Allah released Gog and Magog, and they spread out all over the world with their indestructible power, Gog and Magog would bring the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own. Has this happened as yet? Yes, it has. Who brought them back? Modern Western civilization did it. And therefore Gog and Magog are those who control power in the modern West, and also those who control power in Israel. Now then, in Surah Al-Isra of the Quran, Allah speaks about the Israelite people, and He says that they will commit fasad on earth twice. Fasad, that which corrupts to such an extent it can destroy, And Allah has reserved the most terrible punishment of all for Assad. But why has the Quran said twice, when both occasions have already occurred before the Quran was revealed? So what happened to this third one now, which is happening now? Why does the Quran say two when there are three? That's the question. Answer: the first and the second were Banu Israel, but the third is not Banu Israel. That's why he says two. The third one is Gog and Magog. Those who control power in Israel today are not really Israelite people. They don't have any genetic link with Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam and the Israelite people. They are not Banu Israel. They are a European people who embrace Judaism. And they are the Zionist movement, comprised of Jews and Christians. Okay? And they are the ones who control power in modern Western civilization and in Israel. This is how Gog and Magog are connected with Israel today.
Thank you very much. That concludes our Q&A.